I was going to say the meeting is being recorded for publication on the Thatcham Town Council YouTube panel. And very busy it is too. It's more popular than the BBC.
Oh, absolutely.
8 o'clock in the morning.
And cheaper.
We meet here tonight to really one item, the local plan review. The item number 4, long service awards, will be deferred to a special meeting of the Finance and General Purposes Committee. We're still gathering some information. So I'll start up with apologies for absence, if I may, Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies received from councillors John Boyd, Mike Cole, Ellen Crumley, Paul Field and Owen Jeffrey.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any declarations of interest, members, on the item tonight? Then, without further ado, we are here to consider and agree the Town Council's response to the Local Plan Review 2022-2039, the Regulation 19 consultation. I believe the Chairman of Planning and Highways, Councillor Simon Pike, will introduce the item.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you. So, the Chairman, have we got public question time?
We haven't tonight because it's a special meeting.
Oh, okay. Fine.
Okay.
It's on there. Again. Apologies.
So I think members of Planning and Highways will already be familiar with this, but I'll give a quick introduction. So the purpose of a Regulation 19 consultation is rather different from the previous one that we answered, which was to give input to the council to develop the plan. This one, the plan is now finalised as far as the council is concerned, and our representations have two purposes. First of all, for the council to consider whether the plan is ready for submission to the Secretary of State, which in practice is the Planning Inspectorate, and that happens without it's a binary decision. It's either submitted or it's not, and there's no prospect for changing at that point. And secondly, it's addressed to the inspector at the hearing for him to consider those representations. That also means that the format of the submissions is different. We are asked at this point to answer 3 specific questions. Is an aspect of the plan legally compliant? Is it sound? And does it comply with what's called the duty to cooperate? And sound has come into 4 categories: positively prepared, justified, effective and consistent with national policy. And all of those are defined either in law or what's called the National Planning Policy Framework. So we don't have any choice about how we interpret those are predetermined. And for each of those, there's two boxes to tick, either yes or no. But you will see that many of them are not ticked because the question that is being asked is, do you consider that? And if you do answer it, you're asked to give reasons. So if we have decided, if we have not reviewed something and not formed a view, then neither box is ticked. So, moving on to the documentation for the local plan. The local plan itself is 280 pages long, and it's accompanied by documents that are required in law to be submitted, of which the 2 most important for us are the sustainability appraisal and strategic environmental assessment, which are combined into a single document, though they serve 2 legal purposes, and the duty to cooperate. And then there's a wealth of supporting evidence, the longest document of which is 3,314 pages long. And my estimate of the total is approaching 10,000 pages, though I have neither counted it nor read it. And I have to say, probably no one person within the council has read it either. So, and because of the structure, then many of the issues are spread across multiple responses, because each response is addressing a specific clause or a specific policy. So if one of the issues goes across multiple, there are multiple representations on the same topic. Therefore, it's easier to explain the themes of the responses rather than to go through the individual representations. So first point is that the Regulation 18 consultation proposed 2,500 houses, of which 1,250 would be delivered in the current plan period, which was up to 2037.
Clarity, that's within the Thatcham area.
Sorry, this is North East Thatcham, SP17 development. And the current consultation is for 1,500 houses within the current plan period, but is silent on what might or might not happen afterwards. And the evidence is conflicting as to what that is, because a lot of the supporting evidence documents, most particularly the Thatcham Strategic Growth Study, still reference 2,500 houses. So it could be inferred that the event, it is still intended that the eventual side of the development is 2,500 houses, and if it can be inferred, you can be fairly confident that a developer will infer it. So the second question is the feasibility of that development, and there are a number of concerns about that. And the two that I'll focus on here are secondary education, because the proposal in the current plan is not consistent with government or the council's policy for the provision of a secondary school, and GP surgery, which is something new, which doesn't appear to have been consulted. The council doesn't appear to have consulted with what's now the Integrated Health Board. Another major point for us is the lack of infrastructure in Thatcham, both in the town and within the development. And the current plan, which started in 2012, said that Thatcham would be paused for development to allow regeneration of the town centre and improvements in the infrastructure. That has not happened, and the draft plan would not deliver that either. Then there's a question of the settlement boundary, which is the area within which development is presumed to be permitted. And the local plan extends that to the whole of the site which has been offered, which includes areas which are clearly unsuitable, and indeed other policies say that they're unsuitable. But the presumption in planning terms is once that settlement boundary is defined, anything within it is room for development. One new thing, which in fact was a very late, something I spotted very late, and that was why there was an email today, is there is a new policy DM2, which effectively formalises the strategic gap between Newbury and Thatcham, and also between Thatcham and Cold Ash and Ashmore Green. And that is one thing which I have positively supported as saying is sound, but it doesn't include the gap between Thatcham and Bucklebury, despite the fact that the evidence in both cases is identical. And it appears that that is because the consultants who reported on this were advised in advance not to include that. So I've said that element, the omission of Bucklebury from that policy is unsound. Then there are a couple of points relating to the compliance with the process for the development of the local plan, which are technical legal points. And finally, a few minor issues, water efficiency, and a couple of corrections to do with policies in Thatcham, which are almost editorial nature, but they need to be corrected. So the outcome, and this will go to if the council decides to submit it to the inspector, he has three choices: to accept it as it is, and that never happens in total because there's always something that needs to be refined. He can propose main modifications to the council, that's West Berkshire Council, of course, or he can reject it. My gut feel, having never been through a local plan before, is that the extent of the changes that would be required to make the plan sound, not only for North East Thatcham but for other policies, would probably be what can be addressed by main modifications.
That is speculation.
That's speculation, yes. But I obviously have to
Just for everyone to know, but for the video.
And that's why the covering letter and back suggests that that was the most what envisage or anticipate is the outcome, but obviously that is a decision for the inspector. So that is finally, I'd like to thank councillors Lister, Lillycrop and Foster, who took the trouble to read the document and spot a number of corrections in it. And finally, one final comment: if you decide to approve it, I would recommend that we leave a time until probably midday on Thursday for any further purely editorial corrections to be made, nothing of substance that affects the policy, but that would enable us for a final tidy up, should that be needed, and then the document can be submitted in time for the deadline on 4:30 on Friday of this week. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just pick you up on that a little. I'm not sure of having agreed it tonight. We should leave it open to editorial changes, typographic.
That's what I'm sorry. Yes. Okay.
Is that what you meant?
I meant things. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
And corrections of sentences and stuff, but not
Grammatic, syntax.
Yeah.
Typographical.
Yeah.
Not substantive.
Oh, yeah. Certainly not. Yes. And that will be for at this point. It will now be for the clerk to adjudicate on that, because that is
Very good.
We have finished on our work. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. We may ask you later to sum up, but we'll see what. Councillor
Yeah.
David Lister.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I also prepared a few notes in advance because this is such a complicated document and report and the evidence that goes with it. So if you excuse me, I'll read from some of my prepared notes. Some of it might overlap a little bit with the introduction, but I'll try to avoid that as far as possible. So first of all, I just wanted to again acknowledge this was a unanimous recommendation from the Planning and Highways Committee, actually, cross-party agreement to make this recommendation to full council to adopt this. So the comments I hear reflect the work of the full committee and express my thanks to the chairman, who's actually had the hard work to pull all the contributions together into this proposed submission. So what Councillor Pike, when I refer to chairman of Highways, what he didn't mention is in fact there's 23 different areas where the planning committee thought there are reasons to challenge the proposed text because it's either unsound or legally uncompliant or non-compliant. I'm not going to talk to each of those that have been introduced by Councillor Pike. And it is a difficult report, I think, to read for full council and also for members of the public who might be watching this, because it is written in a legalese manner. You need to understand some element of planning laws and policies to make sense of it. So that is the reason why it's in a particular format. And therefore I chose just to draw out 5 areas that I thought most of our residents and the public would be able to understand and to associate the problems with. So the first one, as introduced by Councillor Pike, one of the key requirements of the local plan submission for the council, West Berkshire Council, is to support it with a sustainability appraisal. And when we reviewed this in committee, our view really was that the appraisal that's being performed is really lacking in substance. It's based on, in many cases, on speculation, or I go as far to say as on imagination, and it's not even self-consistent with other aspects of the proposed local plan policies. And this is one reason why the plan is unsound, because the sustainability appraisal is a fundamental part of the submission of the local plan. So secondly, I've got 5 in total, if you bear with me. And secondly, the key policy for Thatcham, and I should start by saying actually, the local plan is what, 60 or 70 policies. The vast majority are actually very good. And actually, I think West Berkshire Council has done a good job of taking a lot of the feedback that they had at the first stage to adopt many of the policies. So I'm particularly pleased that the energy and environmental policies are actually much improved. But for Thatcham, the key policy is a policy called SP17, which is one of the housing policies. And this is a policy which is based on what's called the Thatcham Strategic Growth Study. This was a study prepared several years ago. It came into the previous draft consultation at Regulation 18, but now Regulation 19. And this is for a site that brings forward a proposal for 2,500 properties. This study, which was funded by the developers, has never gone through any consultation, any formal consultation whatsoever, at least that this town council is aware of, and I don't think even the West Berkshire Council. Yet its principles form the baseline for the policy SP17. So these policies are, for a start, they're unstated and refers to a site which is 2,500 properties, and how that is interpreted with the rest of the policy, which refers to approximately 1,500, is unclear. So this is another reason why the plan, in our view, is unsound. Third issue, so introduced by Councillor Pike, is to do with secondary education. It's absolutely critical that a policy is unambiguous and clear in its intent. Now, secondary education is a particular issue for Thatcham. Our main secondary school already exceeds the area, and the capacity of the school is already exceeded for the area that the school has been allocated. So any substantial future developments requires future secondary education provision. And smaller developments in this area at Siege Cross have historically been challenged by West Berkshire Council because the secondary school would have been unable to support the number of students. So it's essential that this plan defines clearly how the land will be made available for a viable secondary school. And it's completely failing to say what area of land will be brought forward within the policy SP17. It refers to land for the developments, but the development is 1,500 houses in the policy, and that's not sufficient land to bring forward a viable secondary school. And in addition, the infrastructure delivery plan, which is also part of the local plan, forecasting the amount of spend and capital spend in future years, fails to identify how the school will be funded. So there can be no confidence in reading the policy that provision is made for secondary education, nor that the site is sustainable. And it's another reason why the plan is unsound. Number 4, there's a complete failure to include the vision work that West Berkshire Council commissioned at great expense. I think it was £100,000, where they commissioned the work from an external consultant to give the longer term view of the development of Thatcham. And this is really critically important as well, because the new plan, as Councillor Pike has introduced, is completely silent on what happens after the plan period, the 17-year period. In the previous Regulation 18 consultation, it was proposed that 1,250 houses would come forward, with a further 1,250 houses bringing up to 2,500 in future years after the plan period. In the Regulation 19 proposal that we have in front of us, it's now saying approximately 1,500 houses will come forward, and it's completely absent now and silent on what happens beyond that period. But it is the same site in both cases, which is 2,500 houses. So this ambiguity and the failure to refer to the vision, again, is another reason why the plan is unsound. Finally, the transport studies, as alluded to, have been performed for 2,500 properties, which is in contrast to the reading of the rest of the plan, and it fails to consider the most serious congestion in Thatcham, which is that of the level crossing. Personal experience, I was stuck in there for 40 minutes in the end, last weekend. Everybody here has got similar experiences. And the vision, the longer term vision, is completely silent again on how this can be managed with the predicted growth of 1,500 or potentially 2,500 houses on the proposed site. So they're the 5 points I just wanted to draw attention to, because I think they're relevant for the public. In summary, in my view, this is a plan that does fail to reflect the lived experience of residents in Thatcham. And it's been developed based on a fundamentally flawed study, that of the Thatcham Strategic Growth Study, that's not been subject to consultation, funded by the developers, and fails to deliver any vision for the existing or new residents of Thatcham. So in closing, I can just say, I do hope the West Berkshire Council read our response carefully, acknowledge the failures where the plan is unsound or legally non-compliant, so that further taxpayers' money is not wasted chasing a poorly thought through plan, which could potentially face rejection by the planning inspector and lead to many years of further debate and controversy. Thank you.
Yeah, well said. I could ask you a question before you sit down, Councillor Lister, and possibly to Councillor Pike as well. In your research, would you have expected to see commentary on what happens after 2039? You both said it's silent on what happens after 2039, but could it be argued, well, that's the period in question, we shouldn't need to look beyond that? That's a question that may be on the lips of our public or other councillors.
So I'll give a view and then Councillor Pike. So part of the reason why I am concerned that statements are not made beyond the plan period is because a regulation 18 statements were made directly beyond the plan period. So what's changed since then? And we're in a very odd position, because when this policy was introduced by the West Berkshire Council Executive Portfolio Holder, Councillor Sumner, to District Council, he introduced it by saying, we are bringing forward a plan that is smaller than the existing plan in Regulation 18. And there's some other commentary as well that don't have the statement in front of me. It's not a smaller site. It's exactly the same site as what it is in Regulation 18. In Regulation 18, it had the forecast beyond the plan period, which is quite right if you were proposing 2,500 houses, because you'd never be able to build a site out within that period. We've now got the same site in Regulation 19. We've got more houses coming forward within the plan period. It's gone up from 1,250 to 1,500. And therefore, I think it's to be expected that Regulation 19, it would come forward to say what happens thereafter. if it is intended that that is the maximum number of houses on the site, it should clearly say so.
It does.
And it doesn't. And therefore it's left unsaid, silent on these statements. So that's my interpretation.
I think Councillor Park's itching to come back on that.
Thank you, yeah. So one of the reasons for the delay in the Regulation 19 consultation and the commissioning of this, the 30-year vision, was a change in the National Planning Policy Framework, which required policies to look, set strategic policies for new settlements or significant extensions to look further ahead, at least 30 years. Now, if the policy is to be delivered in 30 years, then that may not be necessary, but there is a separate policy, SP1, called the spatial strategy, which is not time limited. And therefore, even if SP17 would be completed and therefore didn't need to be considered, policy SP1, I believe, still needs to look further ahead, and it is completely silent. There is no mention of this vision work anywhere in the local plan. So I think that is why the policy, the local plan fails on that point.
Thank you very much, and thank you, gentlemen, for a comprehensive introduction to a potential submission. I'm looking for other speakers now. Councillor Richard Crumble.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really a question for Councillor Pike, for your good self. Of course, I really confess, I'm afraid I haven't read every last word of this is papers I picked up this morning. I believe there are addendums that have since come in. So it was 2,500, now appears to be 1,500 houses. Is there anywhere in your papers or submission an acknowledgement, that Thatcham will have to do its bit to provide some form of additional housing, and perhaps that could be dealt with by existing brownfield sites or similar larger properties that could be demolished to make room for further housing, but all of this kept within the existing planning boundary. That might be a way of showing that Thatcham is prepared to do its bit, and it just might have some appeal to West Berks or the inspector.
I'm going to leave that one hanging because Councillor Pike, I'm going to ask him to invite him to speak last. So I'm sure he'll pick it up. I can see he's itching to cover that one, but let's just tease out any other points. Councillor Jeremy Cotter.
Are we still in questions now, or?
The question, is this a question?
Yeah, it's more of a statement than a question, to be honest, because
Yeah.
I have gone through the 70 pages. I don't know how you guys do it, really. It's a marvelous feat that you have performed to actually go through all of this and wheel out the information. Let's not pussyfoot around. This isn't 1,500 houses, it's 2,500 houses. They've left the area the same, and this has already been said. The presumption will be by the developers that they will go to that 2,500 houses. I remember when we did the one in the old army camp, it went out for negotiation at 700, ended up at 900. They wanted to go up to 1,100. At every time they will come back for another bite, push. So it will go up to that 2,500. I predict that. Whether I'm still here when it gets finished is I won't have to answer the difficult questions then, will I? But basically, this is a fatally flawed plan. My focus is on infrastructure here. I leave the technicalities to these two gents who have done a fantastic job. The infrastructure of Thatcham is at nearly breaking point. The school, secondary school, we have one secondary school compared to the 3 in Newbury. There is no more room there unless it's something major changes. If you go for an NHS dentist, my secretary told me it's at least a year's waiting list just to get an appointment. I can't even think when I managed to get in to see my doctor. We won't mention, well, I will mention chemists. You know, I mean, we're down to, what is it, 1 chemist? And this is going to, so none of these infrastructures, I don't know, it's wobbly. I mean, the last time I went,
There are three. I was in one.
Thank you.
well, I'm glad to hear that because I think it's very quite uncertain because there was one by the Birdwood. There is, technically speaking, one by the doctor's surgery. If you don't mind, my wife queuing outside for half an hour and the pouring rain through an icy wind. It's not really suitable
For
for,
medication.
well, exactly, and I need a lot of it. So as you can see, so these issues are not addressed. The roads are not addressed. I mean, you know, you look at that, and it is 2,500 houses. So I'm not going to go for this red herring of 1,500. That's rubbish. We will get towards gridlock on our roads. I mean, it comes to that before the pandemic, and things have changed, but I'm pretty sure they're going to go backwards, especially if you had another 2,500 houses and the planned possible 900 lorry movements a day from Colthrop on top of that. You know, that's still a possibility. The roads will actually jam up, and it will be because we haven't allowed enough roads or services. I live in one of the developments, Dunstan Park. For that, there was a distributor road invested in there. I know of some housing developments on the south coast where they actually had a bypass put in. We have, for example, for northeast, southwest, there's no roads to the north, the south is blocked. Going westward is basically blocked again because you have to go through Newbury and Thatcham, which creates a horrendous amount of traffic just to get into there. And most of the traffic from these new houses will go that way. East is maybe fairly free, but it's not really going anywhere. I think this is a critical point for Thatcham's future, to be landed with this plan as it is without being addressed. And the corrections that these two gentlemen have put forward is going to be a disaster for Thatcham. It's simple as that. It's not taking into account the growth of the town, the lack of infrastructure. And I'm sorry, I'll get political here. The Liberal Democrats were the only people to put infrastructure in. We did Hennock Field, we did the Discovery Centre, we did the swimming pool. What have we seen from this administration, the cabinet? I mean, now they're talking, what is it, £10 million for Newbury? I don't deny that they need investment, but we're looking at £250,000 here. Well, maybe make the swimming pool a bit nicer. That's the extent of the investment in the infrastructure in our town. It would be a disaster.
Thank you, Councillor Cotton. Councillor Keith Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think if anybody did move into Thatcham, they get a bit of a shock because they'd be wondering where the banks have gone. Well, they've left town, followed by the orchids, as far as I'm aware. But most of us know Heath Lane, and the pavements on the south side are so narrow that only one person can actually traverse the pavement. If anybody comes towards you, you've got to step into the road. Someone said it was a distributor road. Well, we've never believed that. I think it was probably more classed as a relief road for Dunstan Park, which I'm glad that has taken place, of course. But really, the road network it's like country lanes in the north of Thatcham. Not surprising, Bucklebury are up in arms about it. Cold Ash Hill, Ashmore Green, Bowling Green Road, my one and only love. I mean, good grief, the infrastructure just isn't there. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I can see that things are going to be inflamed. I know you want to speak, Councillor Dillon.
Or Councillor Ardon-Water. Some.
No.
Councillor Ardon-Water, I will call you and give the leader the prerogative to
Defensiveness.
so please speak, sir.
Very, very good, man. Thank you. So yes, and again, likewise, I appreciate the amount of work and effort and time that you gentlemen have put into this very lengthy, thorough response. I would like to, perhaps as you expect, sort of just pick up on a couple of your points. Now, of course, it's up to the planning inspector to decide whether your assertions that this plan is unsound to be valid or not, and of course you and this council, you the administration will put forward this report, and he will quite rightly adjudicate as to what is right or wrong. I did have a slight niggle, and Councillor Lister, I appreciate you thanking the administration for improving on the environmental and energy aspects of buildings, because that for me, that as I know several of us here, that aspect of the overall plan and improving building standards is a really important thing. So I'm glad that we all see that there is a large sense of improvement there. I actually met with the leadership of Kennet School and indeed Councillor Cole, along with Brian Little, just last week, actually, on exactly the subject that I think you were mentioning, well, Councillor Lister, about secondary education, and absolutely agreed. Kennet School is full. It needs to expand, and this could be a really good opportunity for that school to expand. And the intent, absolutely, while one must be a bit careful that the issue mustn't be prejudged in terms of which academy trust, as an independent body, runs any secondary education provision. One of the big opportunities of this is to expand secondary education, as well as expand primary healthcare, which is something that's not been done for a very long time, and improve sporting facilities. So there are great upsides. Much of this, and again, the reduction from 2,000 to 1,500, and I'm intrigued by I'm worried by your understanding, Councillor Cotton, that this is in reality is 2,500 and wool is being pulled over the eyes and all that. That's not been my understanding. I've had, and I can't recall the details of where it was, but my understanding absolutely is that there is a very strong, clear commitment of 1,500. You're shaking your head.
No,
well, okay, but you assert very strongly, and this
information.
Finish. Thank you. So I appreciate that during your previous administration, the expansions in Kennet Heath, let's say in Dunstan Park, the numbers of houses grew and facilities were not built. That is not to say we must repeat the mistakes which you went through. So I believe, and I certainly will double check, we've given you assurance, I will double check this commitment to 1,500, which of course is hugely important. I do believe it gives us the opportunity for a much better education provision and again, medical provision. And I totally agree. I think Councillor Woodham said that doctor surgeries are severely under pressure in the town. So again, I will leave it up to the inspector. We all have to leave it to the inspector to decide on validity of these allegations of unsoundness. I'm glad that your party is not now pursuing the Heath Lane alternative plan, which at one stage was being trailed, because of course that development, as was being talked about, would have not done a lot for Heath Lane and Bowling Green Road, Councillor Williams. So again, obviously this report will go through as is. I appreciate your work and diligence which you've gone through it. It's not been poorly thought through. This is my final point. Officers started working on this plan over 10 years ago. A large team of professional planners have spent countless amounts of time going through this. And it's not, if anything, it is not slapdash. Not everything is and can be written there. Apparently if printed on paper, it would be more than 3 meters tall, I'm told. It would not fit in the ceiling, the amount of paper there. But it has been very, very thoroughly researched and thought through. And there will be further discussions and detailed and negotiation work with developers if it is approved by the planning inspector. So again, I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I will abstain on a vote, but again, value the thoughts and am interested in seeing how this goes forward. And finally, again, I will absolutely assure myself, and I'll share my findings with certainly you, Councillor Cotton, of the fact that there is an assurance, as my understanding of 1,500 and not your assertion of 2,500. Thank you.
Before I bring the leader in and then look for Councillor Pike to move the recommendation to agree the response that we have in front of you, and I'm very scrupulous not to be political in this seat, but I don't recall any discussion here supporting any development around the Heath Lane, Councillor Arlington. So unless you were talking about some conversation outside of it, I can't recall anything, but you know, I'm not trying to be too provocative.
Of course, Mr. Mayor. I'm referring to some literature which I received And I do recall, if I've totally got this confused, please accept my apology and we'll withdraw it. I do recall certainly developers who own or are aiming to develop next to the Regency Park and North Heath Lane, together with the other developer who owns land south of the canal and on the old Grondon works, a plan. And my belief was there was communication from the Thatcham Liberal Democrats of this is worth looking at. And I'm thinking back a year or maybe 18 months ago. I thought there was a
Worth looking at.
Okay,
well, I'm paraphrasing, Councillor Woodham. Do you know what I mean?
okay,
That was the thought of it.
thank you. You put that in context. I'm now going to ask the leader of council for his intervention. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, can I just repeat the thanks from other members to Councillor Pike and Councillor Lister? This is a serious body of work here, Mr. Mayor, and shows how seriously this council and this administration has taken it. I just want to come back on a couple of points from Councillor Ardagh-Waters, if I may. The policies, and I think I agree with Councillor Lister, the majority of the local plan has good policies in it. Not created by your administration, as you assert, because they actually went through PAG, which was a cross-body group, and I think quite a lot of the environmental and energy ones actually came from Liberal Democrat members, not necessarily from Conservative members, from what I've been told by my members. However, I don't want to go into the politics. I want to talk about the plan. Has this plan been rushed through? I would contest that there has been an area of rushing through, and that's not necessarily West Berkshire Council's fault. But as soon as we had the regulations from the Office of Nuclear Regulator around what could be built at the western end of the district, that took the eastern end. That's how I'm doing the errors that they did in their reports, putting the town on the wrong side. There then became pressure to find a large strategic site. And I think there's a wide belief amongst residents of Thatcham that the council saw a field and went, that will do. And what can we get in there? We can get 2,500 homes. Oh, great. We can fix the problem that was Graiseley being lost. And then that site has gone through its regulation 18 and it's come back out now 1,500, but it's only for this plan period. So Councillor Ardagh-Waters, you cannot say, as much as Councillor Cotton can't say, what will happen after this plan period. However, the evidence in the current plan is that the site boundary remains the same. So if the inspector was to find this plan sound, Mr. Mayor, with that site boundary allocated and approved, then that would give the developers the right to ask for an increase in housing within that site boundary, and that site boundary will be marked as preference for development. So I would contest that within this plan period it will be 1,500, but I do contest that unless the red site boundary is reduced now at this stage, that it leaves the site open to that additional 1,000 homes, Mr. Mayor. But also we've seen, and it's in here, the press release from the administration saying that they reduced it to 1,500 dwellings. But thanks to their reduction of 1,500, potentially of 1,000 dwellings, we now have an extra 250 houses being built in the plan period. So we may have lost that top number, Mr. Mayor, but we're now being built out at a greater rate than what we were in Regulation 18. In the report as well, it talks about the local plan, the current local plan, which was the 2012 version. And in there, it states that Thatcham would be afforded a period of rest to allow infrastructure to catch up. And that clearly hasn't happened, Mr. Mayor. It's absolutely evident, just as Councillor Ardagh-Waters just pointed out about the doctors, about the schools, that the infrastructure in this town is under massive threat and pressure. But what we don't see is that addressed through the allocation of 1,500 homes. In the infrastructure delivery plan, there is not the data in there. In that infrastructure delivery plan, if you look at it over the 5 years, there is not one penny in that plan for a school in Thatcham. So we are being asked to trust that we will get all this infrastructure. We were asked to trust that we would get the infrastructure in 2012, Mr. Mayor, and we didn't. We're being asked again to trust that we're going to get the infrastructure in this next plan period, yet the council's own IDP doesn't signpost where that infrastructure is actually going to come from, how it's going to be paid for.
We are asked here, Mr. Mayor, to give a view based on evidence. This isn't about the politics of what we want. Councillor Crumley, Thatcham does need to take more housing. You're absolutely right. But that won't sway the inspector if we write in here, we find the plan unsound. However, we're happy to take 700 homes in Thatcham, which is between 5 to 7 homes is what we're hearing that the Kenneth Francis Bailey site could take. Now that is what this administration would like to see in Thatcham. We'd like to see a new purpose-built school with modern technology, with modern playing fields and astroturf built for the students. And then that piece of land, which is landlocked by housing already, you know, Stony Lane is not suitable for rush hour traffic going down it. You know, it's built as a residential road and could take a residential, you know, dwelling there. It would sort out the school problems that we have at Francis Bailey, with children having to rush over the A4 every morning. It would really address a wide range of issues. So, look, if this plan is found unsound, and from our submission, if it's adopted tonight, Mr. Mayor, we would hope that it would be found unsound, then the council need to go back and look again. And they can place make in a different way. The way we have done this local plan, and what we hear at West Berkshire is, we are not a development-led organisation. We have a plan. But how's the plan formed? It's by saying, developers, what do you want? What do you want to build on? So it is development-led, this plan. It's just got a slight caveat around it that we can slightly control the rate of build-out. Wouldn't it be better, Mr. Mayor, if we went to the landowners, if we went to the education providers as a council and facilitated those discussions? And so we developed a local plan proactively with our businesses, with our community groups, with our education providers, so that we actually know what land is available. And us as councils help determine where development will be, rather than just say to developers, tell us what field you want to build over the next 15, 20 years. It's the wrong way to do it. It can be done better. It's just we choose to do it in this particular model. However, going back to the evidence here, Mr. Mayor, I think it's a solid document. It clearly points out errors in the document. It points out missing information in the document. And I think all in all, Mr. Mayor, the inspector will have a job to find the plan sound. But I do appreciate that's for the inspector to make, not for us to make. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If indeed the plan is submitted.
If indeed it is submitted, yeah, quite. No.
Looking for you to sum up and move the recommendation, please.
Okay. So I'll try to address the points that have been made. So I have no knowledge about what the intentions of the officers are, and I believe that their intentions are good. But reading the policies as they stand, I think it leaves the door very wide open to 2,500 houses, even if that wasn't the intention. And in terms of timing, we must remember that the change from 2,500 in 2 plan periods to 1,500 in 1 plan period was only made probably 4 to 6 months ago. Looking at, I don't know the exact date, but looking at the evidence from what numbers are in various reports commissioned at various times. And I think that's the underlying problem, that that's a very late decision. The evidence hasn't caught up with it, and it's led to inconsistencies which could be exploited. On the question for alternatives, the environmental appraisal that Councillor Lister mentioned explicitly states that because of the North East Thatcham site, no other sites were considered in the current plan period. In other words, it's an explicit decision to put all the eggs in one basket of North East Thatcham. And there are quite a number of sites. I think one of the other things I should say is that we are responding to the purpose of this consultation is to respond to the plan as it stands rather than to propose alternatives. That is not part of the remit of this consultation. So there are a number of sites, and one, for example, that came forward recently was the bowling alley on Lower Way, and that has not been included because it is not in North East Thatcham. So, and there's a second element of this is what's called brownfield sites, and there's a register of brownfield sites. And the way that that's been defined is very narrow, and therefore other sites that have potential haven't been counted in the total housing availability. Another rather curious factor, which I felt was outside of the remit of the Town Council to comment on, is that the Regulation 18 consultation proposed 300 sites in the Kennett Centre, which is missing from Regulation 19. And therefore that increases the total housing needed on greenfield sites by the equivalent amount. And I don't know why that is. I felt it wasn't probably appropriate for us to comment on that. though I'm sure that comments will be made, and I'll probably make one myself as a personal individual. So there are these are the factors that effectively the way that the plan has been set up. Firstly, it diverts all of the development potential in Thatcham to North East Thatcham and excludes everything else. And secondly, that the process by which what's called windfall sites and the brownfield sites have been assessed results in an artificially low number, and therefore again pushes up the housing allocation. I think that probably I think that answers your question, Councillor Crumley. I think hopefully, as in all of these cases involving planning, the answer to a simple question is generally very complicated. So I think that's so. With that, I'd like to propose that we approve this for submission to the council, to West Berkshire Council, by the deadline of
3rd of March.
3rd of March, 4:30 p.m. Subject only to typographic corrections if they are found at the decision of the clerk. Thank you.
Do I have a second? Councillor Lister, before I put this to the vote, the council owes you a debt of thanks for your efforts, your thoroughness, supported by Councillor Lister, I know, and other councillors. But I know you have devoted a dramatic amount of time to this over the past few weeks, and I think everybody would agree. Voted for.
Just one final comment. Obviously, it's been a massive amount of effort to read this amount of documentation relating to North East Thatcham. The result of that is that I haven't gone thoroughly through the rest of the document, and there may have been other policies that we might have wanted to actively support had we had the effort to consider them properly.
Or not.
But I think there was one. The one that I mentioned was the.
You're in dangerous thatching defeat.
The question about the positive nature. Had I had more time, because of course it took a lot of time to get into this to understand where the key issues were. I think I might have been able to write something which gave more recognition of some of the other policies which we would have supported had we had.
We forgive you. Yeah, we do.
Well, of course, as an individual, you've got till March the 3rd, so I'll leave that. Clarification.
Just on that, and again, just about the local plan process, I think if we brought all the policies forward, then you probably would have got a unanimous vote in the chamber, and then you do the site selection afterwards, and then that's where some of the politics come into play, I think.
It's been moved. Did you want to talk very briefly, please? Yeah.
I just want to talk, as I said, and what the leader said there is absolutely true. I mean, this is the first time I think West Berkshire Council has tried to combine strategic plans, housing policies, and so forth into a single document.
Well, we had the core strategy last time, which was policy and sites.
Yeah, I think housing was.
We're into
anyway, sorry, apologies. Anyway, Councillor Alderwater referred to me in his remarks. I wanted to come back to that, and I think actually Councillor Alderwater actually answered his own questions, because as soon as you start talking about intent, the intent is something, and I'll double check something, then that's a confession that the legally sound, supposedly document in front of you is not clearly defined and is not unambiguous. If you need to go away and double check with somebody what it means, that's a statement effectively concurring with the statements that we have that the plan is incomplete or is unsound, and that comes about with plans that are ambiguous. So I just wanted to pick up on that. And then the other comment you made with the 10-year preparation, that may very well be the case. And as we said, there's many good policies in there. But the fact that you highlight that you just recently talked to the management of the secondary school of a plan that's been 10 years in the making, which has been out for final consultation since December, and we're reviewing it now, and it has to be submitted. Our responses have to be submitted in the next couple of weeks.
Something to do with the submission, Councillor.
Well, it absolutely is, because you cannot come forward with a plan, and as we see an infrastructure delivery plan, it has no plan for the delivery of the school. And these discussions, quite frankly, should have been had many years ago to have a sound plan of the infrastructure for the town. It's completely missing. So, thank you. That's just what I wanted to close on.
Well said. Because we have a proposal, we have a second, and we've had a strong debate, lots of good interventions. Councillor Adderwater, the policies within there have found quite a lot of favour here tonight. They haven't.
Yeah,
I draw attention
Thank you.
on your bone or whatever you might call it. I'm going to ask for you to vote for the proposal to agree the town council response subject to any typographical tidy ups that the clerk may do for submission March 3rd by 4:30. All those in favour?
Oh, really, Mr. Hart?
And those against? With one abstention, sir. So with that done, and with item number 4 deferred, I declare the meeting closed at 8:51. I predicted 8:45.
Oh.
And chair 7:45. Even chair to the minute. Okay.